Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleepy Explorer, your quiet little spacecraft drifting at the edge of night, where questions don't need quick answers and wonder can take its time. Tonight, let's turn our gaze toward a traveller from beyond our sun, a visitor astronomers call Three-Eyed Atlas. For months it has glided closer, a fragment of ice and mystery, carrying with it the hush of interstellar dark. But now, something curious is happening. As Atlas sweeps past our familiar planets, its path brushes close to the red world. And with each passing week, reports grow stranger, faint flashes that shouldn't be there, fragments that seem to peel away, and above all, silence where updates should have been. If it were only another comet, the images would flow freely. Instead, we find ourselves staring at gaps, at what isn't being said, and that silence leaves us wondering, why Mars? Of all the worlds in the solar system, why does this wanderer seem to draw near the one most haunted by stories of life, of ruins, of secrets buried in red dust? Tonight, we'll drift into that question together. We'll explore what scientists see, what dreamers imagine, and what possibilities whisper at the edge of the unknown. Could it all be coincidence, or is something, somehow, waiting for Three-Eye Atlas on Mars? Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it in your corner of the world? I always find it magical to see our constellation of sleepy travellers stretching across continents and time zones, all under the same sky. And if this quiet journey helps you settle in, feel free to like or subscribe only if it feels right. That way, this little ship of starlight can keep drifting, carrying new companions into the night. So let's set our course now, toward Mars, toward mystery, and toward a story that may change the way we see both. In the long hush of space, silence is not an absence, it is the fabric of the cosmos itself. Planets move without sound, stars burn without voice, and comets glide as though their tails were brushstrokes on a canvas too vast for us to see all at once. Yet every so often, into that silence, something arrives that changes the story. Three-Eye Atlas is one such arrival. Unlike the patient planets bound to our sun, Atlas comes from far away, its trajectory bent not into an orbit but a single fleeting pass. Astronomers call it interstellar, meaning its home lies somewhere beyond the reach of even our longest-lived spacecraft. It drifts in as if through a doorway left open, carrying with it the cold memory of another star, another cradle of creation. Most visitors like this, if we can even use the word most, since there have only been two before announce themselves briefly and then vanish back into the night. Oumuamua, that cigar-shaped puzzle of light from 2017, was the first. Borisov, a more conventional-looking comet, followed in 2019. And now, Atlas, a third guest, shimmering strangely, its coma glowing with an emerald tint, its tail defying expectation by pointing in directions it shouldn't. Already the list of oddities has grown long. Early spectroscopy hinted at a composition richer in carbon dioxide than many solar system comets. Its dust seemed unusually fine, its halo unusually broad. Some reports even spoke of faint flashes, as though fragments were peeling off in slow, luminous sighs. Scientists have explanations: sublimation, unusual ice mixtures, the geometry of sunlight, but explanations don't erase the feeling of peculiarity. And now, as Atlas sweeps deeper into our neighbourhood, the path it traces across the sky brushes against a planet whose myths are already thick with questions: Mars. The red planet has long been a mirror for our imagination. In the 19th century, astronomers thought they saw canals there, straight lines etched into the ochre face like the handiwork of engineers. Later, spacecraft revealed only valleys and dried riverbeds, but the whispers did not stop. A face on Mars, caught by Viking in 1976, became a symbol of hope for some, skepticism for others. And beneath the dust, instruments have since found whispers of water ice, hints of ancient oceans, even faint seasonal releases of methane gas. Into this landscape of lingering suspicion now drifts Atlas. Its trajectory is not a perfect bullseye, but close enough to make one wonder, why here? Out of the billions of possible paths through the solar system, why should the third interstellar visitor brush so near the very world most associated with alien speculation? Coincidence is the easy answer. But when the silence around Atlas grows heavier, when data from telescopes becomes sparse, when press releases are phrased carefully, it is human nature to ask for something deeper. Perhaps it is nothing more than orbital mechanics, the mathematics of gravity playing out with impartial hands. Yet perhaps, just perhaps, this is not only a comet passing by. Perhaps this is a rendezvous written long before our species ever learned to tilt its eyes skyward. Why Mars, of all planets? That is the question that lingers now, like a low note reverberating through the chamber of the solar system. And it is the question with which we begin tonight's story. To speak of Mars is to speak of anticipation. For centuries it has been the stage upon which we project our hopes and our fears. Telescopes in the age of brass and glass showed a world both near and alien, a neighbour bright enough to tug at the imagination, but distant enough to remain just out of reach. Stories blossomed in that space between clarity and blur. Writers gave us empires of Martians, canals irrigating dying deserts, war machines with legs like spiders. Scientists, meanwhile, sharpened their instruments and sought to strip the planet of myth, yet often found themselves circling back to mystery. It is against this backdrop that three-eyed Atlas now drifts. When its green-tinted coma was first measured, astronomers noted the unusually high ratio of carbon dioxide to water ice. To most comets from our own backyard, water dominates, carbon dioxide is a trace. But here, the balance tilts. One explanation is that Atlas formed in a colder, darker nursery, perhaps in the farthest reaches of another star's Oort cloud. Another possibility. Its surface was baked by radiation during a lonely interstellar voyage, leaving only the more volatile ices intact. Yet, to the curious mind, such details can feel less like answers and more like hints. Why should a stranger carrying such an exotic fingerprint come to graze the orbit of Mars now, at this exact chapter of our history? If it had swept past, unnoticed 1,000 years ago, no telescope could have caught it. If it arrived 1,000 years hence, perhaps we would already be colonists on the Martian soil, watching from red horizons instead of blue. That it comes today, in the dawn of our interplanetary age, feels like timing too poetic to ignore. As Atlas approaches Mars's orbital neighbourhood, astronomers watch closely for gravitational effects. A slight change in velocity, a perturbation of its hyperbolic path, could reveal much about the comet's mass and structure. But it also provides fertile ground for imagination. If Atlas appears to slow, even subtly, is it simply gravity's hand, or is it somehow choosing? We are trained to distrust words like choosing in science. A comet is not a pilot, yet the human mind resists silence. It stitches meaning into voids. When light curves grow irregular, when data pauses longer than we expect, we hear whispers where none may exist. And in this case, those whispers gather on the red sands of Mars. Consider, Mars is already home to our machines. Rovers crawl its plains, landers sniff its thin air, orbiters map its canyons from above. If something unusual were to occur as Atlas passed by, instruments might be there to see it. Imagine the signal, a flash across Perseverance's skycam, a blip in Maven's sensors. If those signals never reach the public eye, the absence itself becomes a story. And so we return to the question that threads through every thought tonight. What could be waiting there? Is Mars simply a silent bystander, its desert gaze lifted toward a passing stranger? Or is it more a rendezvous point, a cosmic crossroad where travellers from elsewhere might pause, if only briefly? The probability, the rational voice insists, is slim. Gravity wells, orbital mechanics, chance alignments, they can all explain the encounter. but the poetic voice within us refuses to be hushed. It reminds us that coincidences, when piled one upon another, begin to feel like patterns, and patterns, whether real or imagined, beg to be followed. Atlas continues its drift, bright enough to be traced by careful eyes, faint enough to vanish if you look away. Mars waits ahead, a world of rust and riddles. Between them lies a thread of possibility, thin as silk, stretched across millions of kilometers, and as we watch, the thread grows taut. Is it being pulled, or is it aiming for something? From a distance, 3I Atlas appears no different than the countless comets that have swept across human skies. A faint streak, a blurry nucleus, a tail that fans out like mist in the sunlight. Yet the more closely it is examined, the more its differences stand out. It is as though the universe has painted something familiar, then brushed over it with colours just slightly out of place. The glow of carbon dioxide, so unusual among comets we know, gives its coma a strange chemistry, one that suggests a birthplace far colder than our sun ever allowed. Its trajectory, hyperbolic and precise, marks it not as a wanderer from our own Oort cloud, but as a messenger from another star altogether. And now, that message is being carried across a stage where human curiosity already lingers: the orbit of Mars. Mars has long been treated like a halfway point between the known and the unknown. It is close enough for robotic scouts, far enough that no human foot has pressed its soil. Its canyons are deeper than Earth's, its volcanoes taller, its deserts broader. Once, rivers carved through its plains, leaving behind dry deltas that whisper of a wetter age. Even now, seasonal trickles of dark streaks hint at transient flows, like veins that have not entirely dried. Into this theatre of mystery steps 3I Atlas. For scientists, the encounter is an opportunity to measure, to chart, to compare. Will Mars's weak gravity nudge the comet, even imperceptibly? Will its thin atmosphere brush against the edges of the coma, leaving fingerprints in the tail? For dreamers, the same encounter becomes a canvas. If a traveller from another star were to pause, however briefly, where better than at a world already tangled with speculation of life? It is here, in this overlap of observation and imagination, that the silence around 3I Atlas becomes heavy. Telescopes that once reported daily seem quieter now. Data comes not in streams but in drops. Press releases are worded with caution, their language careful, their tone subdued. Some explain this as the normal ebb and flow of research. Instruments must be calibrated, time must be shared with other projects. Yet to a restless mind, the quiet feels like a mission, as though something has been glimpsed that cannot yet be spoken. And so, as Mars looms larger in the comet's path, the questions multiply. If there is nothing unusual, why the quiet corridors? If all is routine, why does the object's behavior resist tidy categorization? And if there is something subtle, something that does not fit the standard checklists, then why Mars, of all places, should be the backdrop? The answer may be simple: chance. A throw of cosmic dice that just happened to place a fragment of another world near our own red neighbour. But another answer waits at the edges of thought, one we cannot easily dismiss. Perhaps there is intent. Not the intent of a comet, mindless and inert, but of a story larger than ourselves, unfolding in ways we can sense but not yet measure. As listeners, as watchers, as tiny observers beneath the dome of night, we find ourselves holding that question like a fragile lantern. Why Mars? Why now, when our species is just learning to stretch toward other worlds? Why with this comet, the third of its kind, and not with any of the countless others? 3I Atlas drifts closer, Mars waits in its orbit, and between them hangs the possibility that this is not a passage, but a meeting. Whether science confirms or denies, whether silence hides or simply reflects, the thought itself is enough to stir wonder. And so, Section 1 leaves us not with conclusions, but with the question that will echo through every chapter to come. Why Mars, of all planets? In astronomy, numbers are the closest thing we have to fingerprints. Every comet, every asteroid, every planet leaves behind a pattern of motion that can be charted, measured, and tested against the unblinking rules of gravity. For 3i Atlas, those numbers quickly revealed something that set it apart: the unmistakable curve of a hyperbolic orbit. A hyperbola is a shape of departure, while ellipses close in on themselves, drawing planets back around the Sun in eternal repetition. A hyperbola stretches outward, never to return. When astronomers calculated the trajectory of 3i Atlas, the conclusion was inescapable. This object was not born here. Its path was not tethered to the Sun's leash. It came from beyond, and it will leave beyond, carrying with it only the briefest memory of our system. Yet within that sweeping arc lies detail, and in the detail, questions. The comet's inbound velocity, its angle of approach, its subtle shifts as it passes the giants, all are data points that allow astronomers to reconstruct a kind of biography. Where did it come from? How long has it drifted between stars? What forces nudged it into our neighbourhood at this precise moment? At first, the numbers suggested nothing unusual. Its velocity matched the expected distribution of interstellar visitors. Its composition, though exotic in its balance of ices, could be explained by formation in a colder nursery. But as the trajectory was refined, small curiosities emerged. The path was remarkably close to Mars's orbital domain. Not a collision course, not even a flyby near the atmosphere, but close enough to raise eyebrows. Statistically, such alignments should be rare. The solar system is vast, its planets spread out like distant buoys on a cosmic sea. For an interstellar traveller to skim the vicinity of any planet is unlikely. For it to brush near Mars, a world so deeply woven into our cultural fabric of speculation, feels like more than randomness. To scientists, the first instinct is to test this feeling against the cold clarity of math. Was the trajectory influenced by Jupiter's gravity, bending its path just enough to bring it near Mars? Were initial observations slightly off, corrected only later as more data improved the orbital model? These are reasonable answers, and in most cases, they suffice. Yet here, with 3i Atlas, each adjustment seemed only to strengthen the proximity. The more precise the numbers became, the more tightly they hugged Mars's orbital lane. What does it mean for an interstellar comet to pass near a planet? On the surface, perhaps nothing. Gravity guides countless rocks across invisible lines every day. But in the human imagination, meaning spills into the gaps left by probability. When something rare brushes against something storied, coincidence feels like choreography. Consider the language astronomers use when describing orbits. A planet escorts, a moon, a comet visits the inner system, an asteroid lurks in resonance with Jupiter. The math may be impartial, but the metaphors betray us. We cannot help but cast these objects as actors on a stage, their motions lines in a script. And so, when 3i Atlas passes close to Mars, we do not see an equation, we see a scene. Perhaps it is only a scene of passing, one actor crossing another's spotlight before moving off stage forever. But perhaps it is something more deliberate, at least in the way we tell the story, a meeting, a rendezvous, a pause in the endless silence where two wanderers, one planetary, one interstellar, find themselves sharing a moment. The rational voice insists, it is numbers. The probability may be small, but small does not mean impossible. The dice of the cosmos have rolled stranger outcomes before, but the poetic voice whispers louder in the quiet. Is this coincidence, or is there something hidden in the mathematics we do not yet see? And so the calculations, meant to quiet speculation, have instead amplified it. Each refinement of the orbit sharpens the question, why Mars of all planets? Astronomy is, at its heart, a discipline of patience. To measure the path of something like 3i Atlas requires observation after observation, each dot of light plotted across the blackboard of the heavens. Computers churn through the data, refining models with every new position logged. The more dots you add, the sharper the curve becomes, until at last the object's trajectory is no longer guesswork but certainty. With 3i Atlas, certainty arrived carrying unease. The numbers declared what no one could argue. This comet is not native. Its velocity exceeds the limits of any solar system body, ensuring it will not linger. That part was clear. What was less clear was the way its path skimmed Mars's orbital territory, as though tracing a fingertip across its orbit. At first, skeptics pointed out that orbits overlap constantly. The solar system is full of crossings. But closer examination revealed that the margin here was unusually slim. Imagine standing on a vast field and tossing a pebble from one end to the other. The pebble could land almost anywhere, yet by chance it falls near the one small red stone lying on the ground. No one claims design, but the coincidence demands a second glance. For planetary scientists, the proximity sparks technical questions. Could Mars's gravity leave a measurable imprint on 3i Atlas's path, a subtle kink that future astronomers might detect when charting its outbound course? Would its coma and tail react differently under the sun's light as it shares the stage with Mars, producing effects our instruments might mistake for anomalies? Such questions drive proposals for telescope time, for careful monitoring of the encounter. For others, the significance is less mechanical. Mars has always been more than rock and dust. It is a mirror for longing, a screen upon which human imagination has projected civilizations, canals, temples, and ruins. The fact that 3i Atlas brushes this world, and not any of the others, feels almost narrative in its timing. The mathematics of orbital dynamics are meant to be antiseptic, stripping away myth. Yet even within the neat precision of equations, patterns emerge that feel uncanny. When astronomers modelled the trajectory backwards, seeking its origin, they found no obvious parent star. It is as if 3i Atlas had wandered the galaxy aimlessly for eons, only to slip into our system along a corridor that intersected Mars's domain. Coincidence is powerful, but it does not silence the questions. Was it Jupiter's vast gravity that bent the comet into this approach? Or was the line always meant to cross Mars's orbit? Why now, when human eyes are on Mars more intently than ever before, filling it with landers, rovers, and dreams of settlement? Why not Venus, or Mercury, or Neptune? The human brain rebels against randomness when it wears a cloak of significance. Numbers tell us one story, probabilities and perturbations. But somewhere deeper, another story forms. One where coincidence becomes choreography. If 3i Atlas appears to aim, even unintentionally, we cannot resist the thought that it is aiming for something. And so the calculations born of precision, of patience, of impartiality become fuel for imagination. In charting its path, astronomers sought to prove its indifference. Instead, they gave us another riddle. A line that leads straight past the most storied planet in our cosmic neighbourhood. The rationalist will say there is no script, the comet does not choose, the numbers only look like intention because we are wired to see patterns. And yet, in the quiet, the poetic voice persists. What if the numbers are more than chance? What if this is a rendezvous written in the mathematics of the sky itself? The closer 3i Atlas drifts toward Mars's orbital lane, the more every decimal place begins to matter. Astronomers refine their models with obsessive care, checking for gravitational nudges from Jupiter, Saturn, even tiny influences from lesser bodies. Every factor is accounted for, every possibility weighed. Yet when the dust of computation settles, the answer remains: the comet passes near Mars. Not dangerously close, not dramatically so, but near enough to mark the coincidence with an asterisk. In the raw language of numbers, there is no mystery. An orbit is only a line through space shaped by gravity and motion. But in the translation to human thought, the line bends into a story. We ask why this line intersects that one. We wonder why now, why here, why Mars. For scientists trained to resist anthropomorphism, such questions can feel indulgent, and yet, even they acknowledge that coincidences have value. A near approach to Mars provides opportunities to measure the comet's outgassing against a planetary backdrop, to study its tail as it interacts with solar wind in a region already monitored by orbiters. If Mars's presence leaves even the faintest signature in the data, it will enrich our understanding not just of 3-eye Atlas, but of interstellar objects more broadly. Still, for every sober explanation, another possibility stirs in the cultural imagination. What if the proximity is not just scientific fortune, but cosmic design? If 3-eye Atlas were more than ice and dust, if it carried with it some trace of purpose, then Mars, the planet most associated with alien speculation, would be a fitting destination. Numbers alone cannot silence that line of thought. They confirm the closeness, but they do not tell us why it should feel significant. It is left to us, the storytellers, the dreamers, to fill in the silence between the digits. We trace the arc and whisper of rendezvous, of signals, of hidden meaning. Even those who dismiss such speculation cannot quite escape its pull. And perhaps that is the real power of the calculations, not only to chart where 3-eye Atlas will go, but to remind us how little we control the stage upon which such dramas unfold. We are bystanders in a theatre, where mathematics sets the script, but interpretation writes the dialogue. The line across the stars is impartial, yet it brushes against the heart of our myths. Mars turns in its orbit, rusty deserts glowing under a pale Sunday. 3-eye Atlas approaches, green shimmer trailing into the void. Their paths align briefly, a near miss in cosmic terms, yet a near touch in ours. And in that moment, we are left with the enduring question: is this simply the mathematics of chance, or is something somehow aiming for Mars? Mars has always been more than a planet. To astronomers, it is a neighbour, small, dry, its thin atmosphere painting the horizon in shades of rust. To storytellers, it is a canvas, red as fire and fertile for imagination. Few worlds have carried so heavy a weight of myth, speculation, and longing. The story began long before rovers crawled its plains or orbiters traced its canyons. In the late 19th century, Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli mapped the planet's surface and described dark streaks he called canali. The word meant channels, but in translation it became canals, implying construction, intelligence, even civilization. Almost overnight, Mars became a world of possibility. Writers filled it with industrious Martians, building waterways to save a dying planet. Telescopes quivered with expectation, each new glimpse of the red disk a potential revelation. Even as better optics revealed the truth that the canals were illusions of contrast, Mars had already taken root in the collective imagination. H.G. Wells turned it into the launching ground of invaders in the War of the Worlds. Edgar Rice Burroughs crafted entire kingdoms upon its deserts. Ray Bradbury made it a mirror of human dreams and failings in the Martian Chronicles. To read these works is to feel how one small dot of light in the sky expanded into an entire universe within us. But Mars has never fully shed its strangeness. In 1976, NASA's Viking 1 orbiter snapped a photo of a mesa in the Cydonia region. Shadows sculpted it into the unmistakable shape of a face. Eyes, nose, mouth gazing upward through the thin Martian air. Scientists later explained it as a trick of light and geology, confirmed by sharper images decades later. Yet by then, the idea of a face on Mars had already become legend. For some, it was evidence of ancient builders. For others, a reminder of how readily our minds carve meaning into stone. And still, the mysteries multiplied. Spacecraft have found evidence of dry riverbeds, ancient deltas, and minerals that form only in liquid water. Seasonal plumes of methane drift in and out of detection, hinting at hidden processes beneath the soil. Ice lurks beneath the poles, and briny seeps may still trickle on warm days. None of this proves life, past or present, but none of it rules it out. In such a landscape, how could 3I Atlas pass unnoticed? The red planet is already burdened with centuries of speculation, its every shadow scrutinized for whispers of intelligence. For an interstellar visitor to brush so near only intensifies the lens. It is not just another comet drifting past. It is a comet from beyond the sun, arriving in a place where we have long, half-suspected secrets to lie waiting. Why should Mars, of all planets, wear this crown of mystery? Why not Venus, shrouded in clouds? Why not Europa, with its hidden ocean? Perhaps the answer lies in visibility. Mars is bright enough to see with the naked eye, distinctive in its rusty hue. It is close enough to tempt, far enough to elude. Unlike the gas giants, it is a solid world, its surface marked with features that seem almost familiar: mountains, valleys, plains. It is Earth-like in size, Earth-like in day length, Earth-like in tilt. The similarities whisper, even as the difference is worn. For centuries, Mars has been the magnet that draws both science and story. Its gravity may be weak, but its pull on the imagination is immense. And now, into that field of fascination drifts 3I Atlas, trailing its emerald glow, a visitor from another star stepping briefly onto a stage already set for wonder. The coincidence feels theatrical, almost scripted. A world long suspected of harbouring mysteries meets an object that embodies mystery itself. Two riddles, crossing paths in the night, and we, watching from Earth, cannot help but ask, what makes Mars such a magnet for cosmic myths? To understand why Mars exerts such a powerful pull on our imagination, one must consider its dual nature, familiar yet alien. Unlike distant giants shrouded in storms, or airless moons locked in silence, Mars looks almost like Earth seen through a veil. Its mountains cast shadows, its valleys stretch across horizons, its polar caps gleam with frost. For early astronomers peering through simple lenses, it seemed a second Earth, diminished but recognizable. That familiarity bred expectation. If Earth gave rise to life, why not Mars? The canals imagined by Schiaparelli and popularized by Percival Lowell became more than lines on a map. They were a story of survival. In Lowell's vision, Mars was a dying world whose inhabitants engineered vast waterways to carry polar meltwater to the equator. The tale resonated because it echoed fears of scarcity, drought, and decline on our own planet. The Martians, though imagined, were us in a mirror, grappling with inevitability. Even as telescopes improved and the canals vanished into optical illusion, the myth endured. It survived because it fed a hunger deeper than evidence, the need to know we are not alone. Each new spacecraft that approached Mars carried both instruments and unspoken hopes. Vikings sought microbial life in the soil. Spirit and opportunity searched for the fingerprints of water. Curiosity sniffed the air for methane, that fragile exhalation of biology. Perseverance now hunts for signs of ancient microbes, carefully caching samples for a return mission. With every mission, Mars gives us fragments, but never the whole. Yes, there were rivers, but long ago. Yes, there is ice, but locked beneath dust. Yes, there is methane, but faint and irregular. Each answer is laced with another question, as if the planet prefers to whisper rather than confess. It is against this backdrop of partial revelations that 3I Atlas approaches. The comet does not need to do anything spectacular to amplify our wonder. Its mere presence, alien and unexplained, intersects with a world already charged with centuries of longing. To see the two aligned even loosely is to feel the tug of inevitability. Some will insist that this is chance, no more significant than a bird flying across the face of the moon during an eclipse. But significance is not always in the mechanics, it is in the meaning we ascribe. And Mars, of all planets, is primed to receive meaning. 1,000 novels, 100 years of speculation, and countless hours of observation have prepared it to be the chosen stage. Think of how we map our myths onto the night sky. Constellations are only scattered stars, yet we connect them into hunters, lions, swans. We cannot resist pattern. So too with Mars. When an interstellar traveller like Three-Eye Atlas drifts near, our minds draw lines, see intentions, and vent rendezvous. It may be mathematics alone, but to us it is choreography. And in that choreography, Mars plays the role it has always played. The cosmic magnet, the focal point of yearning. Perhaps no discovery on Mars will ever equal the dreams projected onto it. Perhaps the truth will remain more subtle, more geological, more restrained, yet the magnetism persists, drawing every anomaly, every mystery, every fragment of speculation into its orbit. And now, with the arrival of Three-Eye Atlas, the magnet grows stronger. The question gathers weight, pressing upon us like a riddle whispered in a crowded hall. If Mars has always been our chosen screen for cosmic imagination, then what happens when an interstellar object drifts across it? There is a curious rhythm to the way Mars receives attention. Centuries pass, and then suddenly the red planet is everywhere in telescopes, in novels, in news headlines. It seems to flare in the cultural imagination the way it sometimes flares in brightness as it swings near Earth. And always, the question is the same. What secret does it hold? In the 19th century, it was canals and civilizations. In the 20th, it was faces carved in stone and whispers of microbial life. In the 21st, it is methane, water ice, and the possibility of ancient oceans. The surface changes in our minds, but the gravity of mystery remains constant. Mars never gives us a definitive answer. Instead, it doles out clues in fragments, as though guarding its story with deliberate restraint. Into this rhythm now comes Three-Eye Atlas, sweeping across the solar system on its hyperbolic arc. It has no obligation to us, no awareness of our myths. Yet by brushing near Mars, it becomes part of the same story, a new layer folded into an old riddle. We cannot help but see it this way. Our minds fuse the narratives together. The stranger from interstellar space and the planet that has always seemed halfway between science and legend. This is the magnetism of Mars, not only its geology, but its role as a stage. When an anomaly appears, Mars absorbs it. When a visitor passes, Mars lends it significance. The planet has become a kind of echo chamber where mystery is amplified, never silenced. A single photograph of a shadowed mesa can spark decades of speculation. A single wisp of methane can launch 1,000 theories. And so, a single interstellar comet passing nearby becomes not just an astronomical event, but a cultural one. It may be true that chance alone brings Three-Eye Atlas into Mars's vicinity. It may be that gravity and geometry are all that is at play, but chance is never perceived in a vacuum. It is filtered through centuries of expectation. When coincidence touches a myth, it feels like destiny. As Earth watches, Mars turns beneath its thin veil of atmosphere, rust-coloured deserts stretching toward every horizon. Above, the faint smudge of Three-Eye Atlas continues its approach, halo glowing strangely green. Two mysteries, one planetary, one interstellar, find themselves briefly aligned, and the weight of meaning falls into place almost without effort. Is it only imagination that binds them together? Almost certainly. Yet imagination is itself a force, shaping what questions we ask, what missions we launch, what futures we dare to pursue. If Mars is the magnet, then Three-Eye Atlas is the needle, pointing us once more toward the mysteries we cannot resist. And so we end this section with a question as old as every myth, and as new as tonight's sky. What makes Mars such a magnet for cosmic myths, and what new story will Three-Eye Atlas add to its gravity of mystery? Astronomy is often described as a science of light. Photons travel unimaginable distances, bearing with them the stories of their origins. By splitting that light into spectra, astronomers can measure temperature, composition, or velocity, even hints of chemistry too faint for the naked eye. Each observation is like listening to a whisper carried across the centuries. But sometimes, what captures attention is not the light we receive, but the silence that follows. 3I Atlas has been luminous enough to study. Its coma has revealed an unusual abundance of carbon dioxide. Its halo has shimmered faintly green, the byproduct of broken-down molecules glowing under the sun's radiation. And yet, in recent weeks, reports have slowed. Observatories that once released steady streams of data now offer only sparse updates. Where details should multiply, we find only careful phrases and cautious language. This is not unusual in itself. Telescopes juggle many priorities, and time is precious. But the gaps feed imagination, and into those gaps stories rush like air into a vacuum. Whispers spread of faint flashes seen in Atlas's tail, brief brightenings, like sparks in the dark. Some describe fragments peeling away, not in the chaotic spray expected of comets, but in patterns, as though small pieces detached in deliberate intervals. To the scientific mind, such behavior might signal jets of gas erupting from beneath the surface, pushing off clumps of dust and ice. To the speculative mind, it invites stranger ideas, probes released like seeds, fragments of a machine activating after a long dormancy. The distinction lies not in the data but in the interpretation. A sudden brightening can be explained as sublimation, a natural flare as frozen gases vaporize under solar heat. Yet, when the timing feels rhythmic, our brains strain to find intention. We are, after all, creatures who turn stars into constellations, clouds into shapes, silence into signals. What complicates the story is the pattern of communication, or the lack of it. Major observatories tend to publish their findings quickly, proud of each discovery. But with 3I Atlas, the rhythm has slowed. Updates are generic, notes are terse. Some speculate that there is nothing unusual, only the normal bottleneck of peer review. Others suspect the opposite, that something curious has been observed, and caution rules until certainty can be claimed. Into this space of uncertainty, imagination thrives. Online forums exchange theories. Amateur astronomers report odd streaks in their photographs, faint lines that appear beside the comet, then vanish. These may be artifacts, tricks of exposure, but they resonate because they echo the whispers of professional silence. Meanwhile, Mars turns silently in its orbit, the nearest planetary witness to this interstellar drift. If something unusual were happening, if fragments truly were peeling away in ordered fashion, could Mars's orbiters or rovers detect it? Could a camera on the surface catch a glimmer against the stars? And if they did, would the world be told at once, or would the images vanish into quiet review, another corridor of silence? The power of absence should not be underestimated. When the lights of communication dim, the shadows grow long. In those shadows, questions swell. Could these be natural jets of gas, or fragments of alien design? If you step back for a moment and think about it, the mystery of 3I Atlas is not only in what it shows us, but in how we react to the gaps. Humans are restless interpreters. A missing report, a delay in publishing, even a poorly worded press release, each becomes fertile soil for speculation. Silence, in its own way, is as provocative as sound. Consider the flashes some observers claim to see. A comet, when warmed by the sun, often erupts unpredictably. Pockets of gas burst, sending fountains of dust streaming into the coma. These eruptions can brighten the object dramatically, then fade within hours. That much is normal. But in the case of 3I Atlas, some reports suggest repetition flares at intervals, as though the object itself were pulsing. To most astronomers, such talk is premature. The data is too noisy, the measurements too scattered, yet the rhythm of the rumour persists. This is how patterns are born, not always in the evidence, but in the echoes. One observer mentions it, another confirms something similar, and soon the story takes on a life of its own. By the time official voices weigh in, The idea has already rooted in the imagination. And then there are the fragments. A comet shedding material is no surprise. Many leave trails of debris that later become meteor showers. But the language matters. Words like peeling away or detaching suggest something deliberate, almost mechanical. Amateur astronomers staring at faint streaks in their images sometimes describe them not as random sprays but as small companions drifting just behind like children trailing a parent. Whether illusion or fact, the image lingers. Overlaying all of this is the question of Mars. For it is not Earth that stands closest to the path of Three-Eye Atlas, but the red planet. If fragments are real, if flashes truly occur, Mars is the planet most likely to witness them. Its orbiters sweep the skies, its rovers lift cameras to the heavens in moments of stillness. To imagine one of them catching a glimpse is irresistible. But here too, silence reigns. Mars missions do release images, sometimes spectacular, sometimes routine. Yet with billions of files streaming back, who could say what might slip unseen into the archives? If a faint streak appeared in the sky of Jezero crater, would it be recognized at once as interstellar? Or would it wait, buried in databases, until some curious eye years later drew the connection? These possibilities highlight a truth about our age. Discovery is no longer only in what is observed, but in what is shared. When silence stretches, it is not always a cover-up. Sometimes it is simply the slowness of process, the backlog of analysis. But to the wider world, waiting in curiosity, that slowness tastes like secrecy. And secrecy, imagined or real, is the perfect fuel for mystery. As Mars turns, as Three-Eye Atlas glows faintly green, we lean closer to the whispers. Maybe the comet is natural in every respect, only our minds weaving intention into ice. Or maybe, just maybe, the whispers conceal something genuine, an anomaly too fragile to announce, too strange to explain. And so the question sharpens. Are these merely jets of sublimating gas? Or could they be signals, fragments, designs beyond our understanding? The cosmos does not speak in words. It speaks in patterns of light, in sudden silences, in fragments of dust trailing across orbits we barely understand. And yet, for centuries, humanity has been fluent in translating those signals into meaning. Sometimes we are right, sometimes we are wrong, but always we listen. With Three-Eye Atlas, the listening has become almost feverish. Professional astronomers sift through spectra, searching for signatures in carbon dioxide, water, or carbon monoxide. They argue over the brightness curves, debating whether an outburst was natural or noteworthy. Meanwhile, outside the academic halls, the wider world leans into the quiet, filling the spaces between reports with imagination. It is easy to forget how new this all is. Only twice before in human history have we confirmed visitors from beyond the sun. Oumuamua in 2017, Borisov in 2019. Both sparked flurries of speculation, though neither lingered near Mars. Three-Eye Atlas is the third, and already it carries the burden of comparison. Oumuamua, with its strange acceleration. Borisov, with its comet-like clarity. Atlas seems to borrow traits from both. Familiar yet unsettled, explainable yet not quite contained. Against this backdrop, the faint flashes and possible fragments become more than curiosities. They become the latest verses in a song we are straining to hear. Some call it noise, others hint at signal. But in truth, the line between the two is thin, and often drawn after the fact. A meteor shower once seemed random until we traced it to cometary debris. Radio bursts once felt like anomalies, until we learned of pulsars. How many oddities were dismissed in their time, only to be understood later as discoveries. And so, silence is never neutral. When updates slow, when images are withheld for calibration, when reports arrive in vague wording, our minds cannot help but imagine the unspoken. We picture scientists leaning closer to screens, whispering among themselves. We wonder, what have they seen that they cannot yet explain? Mars waits nearby, a silent witness. Its orbiters, its rovers, its satellites, do they too catch glimpses of Atlas's faint green shimmer? Are there files waiting in databases, images not yet flagged, where the interstellar wanderer trails across the Martian sky? If so, will we ever know? Or will those signals remain in the dark, another layer of silence in a story already full of pauses? In the end, perhaps the signals are only in us. The flashes, the fragments, the silence itself, all are mirrors reflecting our own longing for connection. Yet even if the meaning is ours alone, the experience is real. 3i Atlas has already changed the way we listen, teaching us that the gaps can be as telling as the data, that the silence can be as haunting as the light. And so we close this section with the question that lingers like static at the edge of hearing. Could these signals in the dark be nothing more than ice and dust? Or are they the first faint syllables of a language we do not yet understand? Long before 3i Atlas brushed near its orbit, Mars already carried the weight of an ancient ocean. To look at the planet today is to see a world of dust, desert, and rock-red plains stretching endlessly, broken only by craters and mountains. Yet hidden in its surface are scars of water, carved deep when the planet was younger, wetter, and alive with movement. Billions of years ago, Mars may have worn a different face. River valleys cut across its landscapes like veins. Vast basins appear to have once held seas. Minerals that form only in liquid water are scattered across its crust, their chemistry recording the memory of floods. The northern hemisphere, low and smooth compared to the south, hints at the bed of a vanished ocean covering nearly a third of the planet. Scientists pieced this story together bit by bit. Orbiters mapped channels that twist for hundreds of kilometers, branching like trees into tributaries. Rovers traced the outlines of deltas, where water once pooled and slowed. Tiny spheres of hematite, the famous blueberries, spotted by the Opportunity rover, spoke of ancient groundwater seeping through the soil. Even the soil itself, rich in clays and sulfates, whispered of a time when Mars was not barren but dynamic. If Mars once had oceans, the implications are immense. Water is the great solvent of biology, the cradle in which life forms and thrives. On Earth, every ecosystem is tied to it. To imagine Mars awash with lakes and seas is to imagine a time when the planet could have hosted life, not as a fleeting possibility, but as a sustained reality. Where did it all go? That is the question that has haunted planetary science for decades. The leading theory is that Mars lost its magnetic field early. Without protection, solar winds stripped away its atmosphere, thinning it until liquid water could no longer remain stable on the surface. Oceans evaporated, rivers dried, lakes froze. What remains today are only shadows. Ice at the poles, frost in the soil, trickles that vanish in the thin air. And now, into this landscape of absence, comes 3i Atlas. The comet does not know Mars's history, yet by passing nearby it cannot help but stir the thought. What if this interstellar traveller is seeking something not in the present, but in the past? If the oceans of Mars still exist in memory, could they also exist as a destination, an echo across time, a place once chosen, now revisited? Of course, science does not frame it this way. Astronomers measure trajectories, not intentions. But the poetic voice inside us persists. 3i Atlas, carrying ices from another star, brushes past a world where oceans once lay. The resonance is too strong to ignore. It feels less like coincidence, more like conversation, two waters meeting, separated by eons, united in imagination. We might even ask, if life did arise on Mars in that wetter age, where is it now? Fossilized in stone, frozen beneath the regolith, or perhaps scattered long ago, seeded outward by impacts, travelling on dust and meteors waiting in some sense to be found again. And in that question lies the deeper thread of wonder. What if 3i Atlas is not the first time life brushed against Mars? What if this is not an encounter but a return? To picture Mars as a blue world is not fantasy, it is memory written into stone. The traces are there for anyone to see. Dry riverbeds snake across the plains, their winding paths eerily similar to rivers on Earth. Deltas mark places where water once slowed, spreading out into fans of sediment. Minerals that require standing water clays, sulfates, carbonates, lie scattered across the landscape, silent witnesses to a time when Mars was not red but vibrant. And there are hints too that the oceans were not fleeting puddles but vast and enduring. The northern lowlands, smooth and broad, resemble an ancient seabed. Elevation maps show a shoreline curling around its rim, though wind and impacts have since blurred it. For decades, scientists argued over this interpretation. Was it truly an ocean, or only a geological illusion? But as evidence mounted, resistance faded. Today, few doubt that Mars once held seas deep enough to swallow continents. What lingers is the mystery of duration. Were these waters brief, vanishing after a cosmic blink, or did they endure for hundreds of millions of years? If they lasted long enough, the conditions for life might have been generous. Microbes could have flourished in lakes and rivers, ecosystems could have spread. The thought transforms Mars from barren neighbour to ancient sibling, a world that for a time ran parallel to our own. The loss of these oceans was catastrophic. Without a magnetic shield, Mars was stripped bare. Solar winds scoured away its atmosphere, thinning the sky until pressure fell too low for liquid water. The seas boiled off, the rivers froze, and the planet entered a silence it has never escaped. Today, ice remains at the poles and beneath the surface, but the memory of oceans is written only in the scars they left behind. Into this silence drifts 3I Atlas. The comet is, in its essence, a carrier of ice, a frozen archive of water, carbon dioxide and dust. To imagine it brushing near Mars is to imagine a meeting between two exiles of water, one that lost its oceans, one that carries them still in its core. The symbolism is hard to ignore. Mars whispers of what was lost, Atlas whispers of what endures. Together, they form a dialogue across the void. Could such a meeting matter? From a scientific perspective, perhaps only as coincidence. But to the human spirit, coincidence can feel like design. An interstellar wanderer, heavy with ices, passes by a world whose seas have dried. Is it chance or reminder? Does the universe replay these echoes to show us that nothing is ever truly gone, only transformed? And in that question lies a quiet wonder. If life ever took root in Mars's oceans, then perhaps it still lingers somewhere below, frozen, hidden, waiting. If so, the arrival of 3I Atlas near this world feels strangely poetic, as though two chapters of a single story are brushing together, one written in oceans past, the other in interstellar ice. What if this interstellar traveller is not visiting Mars for the first time, but returning to a place where waters once spoke of life? When we look at Mars today, its deserts seem eternal, as if the planet has always been barren, yet every rover and orbiter tells us otherwise. Beneath the dust, the story of water is everywhere. Curiosity found rounded pebbles smoothed by ancient streams. Perseverance drives across an old river delta, sifting sediments that once rested beneath flowing water. Even the atmosphere carries whispers, seasonal hints of methane, molecules fragile enough that their presence feels like a heartbeat, faint but persistent. The oceans are gone, but their ghosts remain. And ghosts have a way of haunting us not with fear, but with longing. We long to know what those seas sheltered, whether their shores heard the ripple of waves against sand, whether life stirred beneath their depths. The evidence suggests conditions were right, but the answers remain locked away, sealed in rocks that no human hand has yet touched. It is in this setting that 3I Atlas glides past. The comet, a frozen body from another star, is itself a time capsule. Its ices carry the chemistry of a different nursery, perhaps older than our sun, perhaps forged before Earth was even formed. In its coma are molecules that echo the ingredients of biology, carbon compounds, volatiles that, under the right conditions, can seed life. Imagine, then, the resonance. A world that once lost its oceans and a visitor that still carries them. They do not meet in any physical sense, yet the symbolism is undeniable. It is as if the universe has staged a silent conversation, one body remembering what it had, the other carrying what it has kept. Some dreamers take this further. What if Mars was once more than an ocean world? What if life arose there, fragile and fleeting? Could fragments of that life have been launched outward by impacts, scattering microbes across space? And if so, is it impossible to imagine that an interstellar traveller like 3I Atlas might be part of that same chain of exchange life, hopping from rock to rock, world to world, star to star? To science, such thoughts are speculation. To imagination, they are a lullaby. The past oceans of Mars become more than geology. They become a stage where the cosmic story of water, life, and memory unfolds. And 3I Atlas, by drifting near, becomes part of that story. We may never know the truth. Perhaps Mars's seas were sterile, their only legacy carved channels and clay. Perhaps 3I Atlas is nothing but dust and ice, following gravity's script. Yet the coincidence draws us in. Oceans forgotten, oceans carried, loss and preservation, past and present. And so, as this section closes, the question echoes gently. If Mars once held oceans, and 3I Atlas now carries the memory of distant ices, could their encounter be more than chance? Could it be a reminder that water and perhaps life was never meant to belong to only one world? If Mars once held oceans, rivers, and rain, then it is only natural to wonder what else those waters might have nurtured. Life, perhaps simple, microbial, clinging to mineral-rich shores. But human imagination seldom stops at microbes. Where there is water, we see possibility. Where there is possibility, we dream of civilizations. The idea of Martian ruins is not new. For as long as telescopes have traced Mars's rusty surface, observers have whispered of structures, canals, fortresses, even cities etched into the sand. Most of these whispers are illusions, tricks of contrast and shadow. Yet the persistence of the idea reveals something deeper: our hunger to find ourselves reflected among the stars. The face on Mars remains the most famous of these visions. Captured in 1976 by NASA's Viking orbiter, it appeared unmistakably human, a colossal visage carved into a mesa, eyes staring from the Martian desert. Later missions with sharper cameras showed only hills and shadows. The face dissolved back into geology, yet for some, the damage was already done. The image had seeded itself into culture, proof that even if stone was only stone, the yearning for ruins would endure. And the yearning did not end there. Patterns of ridges became supposed walls, alignments of mounds became imagined pyramids. With each new dataset, speculation bloomed anew. Scientists explained, debunked, remeasured, but the myths grew alongside the facts, not in opposition but in tandem. Mars had become, by then, not only a planet, but a stage where we rehearsed our oldest story, the rise and fall of civilizations. Now imagine 3I Atlas drifting near such a stage, a comet from another star rich in alien ice brushing past a world already painted with rumours of ruins. Even if coincidence, the pairing feels uncanny. Mars carries the memory of oceans and the suggestion of architecture. Atlas carries the hush of interstellar dark and the shimmer of unfamiliar chemistry. Together, they invite a question that science cannot easily dismiss. What if the ruins of Mars are not entirely illusions? What if this visitor is not the first to have brushed its skies? Of course, the sober voice insists there are no ruins, only rocks. But myths are not bound by sobriety. They thrive in uncertainty, in the shadows between data points. When NASA pauses between updates, when images arrive without commentary, imagination fills the silence. We picture watchtowers on dusty plateaus, observatories carved into cliffs, cities long crumbled beneath drifts of sand. And if such things existed, if Mars once sheltered builders, then the approach of 3i Atlas takes on a haunting shape. Could it be drawn here by memory, as if answering a signal too old for us to detect? Could its icy fragments be seeking not the oceans of Mars, but the remnants of those who once walked beside them? We cannot know. But the very fact that we ask reveals the magnetism of the ruins hypothesis. It is less about proving stone into cities, and more about holding open a door, however faint, to wonder. Mars whispers of what might have been. 3i Atlas answers with what might still be. And in that dialogue, the silence between science and speculation grows strangely gentle, like ruins glimpsed in twilight, half real, half dream. To walk through the ruins of Earth is to feel the press of history. Crumbled temples in the desert, amphitheatres swallowed by grass, stone circles whose meaning we have half forgotten. Each one tells us that civilizations are not permanent, that time is both builder and eraser. When we imagine ruins on Mars, we extend that lesson into the stars. We ask, if a world so close to ours once flourished, what remains of it now? Some researchers tread carefully here. Geology alone explains most features. Mesas, buttes, and eroded ridges take on shapes that mimic intention. Our minds, wired to see patterns, leap to architecture where there is only chance. Yet not all questions are so easily dismissed. Certain alignments, clusters of mounds, arranged with suspicious regularity, invite more than a passing glance. Sharp angles etched into the Martian surface appear less like erosion and more like design, at least to the eye, inclined to wonder. The ruins hypothesis does not claim certainty. It lives instead in the realm of what if. What if Mars, in its wetter age, gave rise not only to microbes but to intelligence? What if for a time there were builders shaping stone, raising monuments, charting the sky? And what if, like so many civilizations on Earth, they fell undone by climate, catastrophe, or their own hand? The beauty of this question is that it dovetails with what science already acknowledges. Mars once had conditions favorable to life. The atmosphere was thicker, the temperature milder, the oceans broad. If life is resilient, and Earth shows us it is, then the step from chemistry to biology may have happened more than once in the universe. Why not here, next door, across a gulf of time? Into this speculative canvas now enters 3i Atlas, a comet from interstellar space, a messenger of unknown origin, brushing past the very world where rumours of ruins refuse to die. The coincidence feels almost theatrical, as though the curtain has lifted on a cosmic stage. If Mars once held builders, could Atlas be tied to them? Could it be a relic of their wanderings, a vessel sent long ago now circling back? The rational voice hesitates. Interstellar comets obey gravity, not memory. Yet the poetic voice presses on. How fitting that the third of its kind should pass near the planet most haunted by speculation. The ruins hypothesis thrives on such alignments. It does not ask for proof, it asks for attention, for a willingness to see the world not only as geology, but as possibility. And in that willingness, a strange comfort arises. Perhaps the ruins are not real, perhaps Atlas is only ice, but to imagine otherwise is to step into a story that stretches far beyond ourselves. It is to walk in the footsteps of dreamers, archaeologists of the unseen, piecing together fragments of a civilization that may never have been, but might yet have left a trace. The question lingers like dust in the Martian air. Could ancient structures be more than rock and sand? If there are ruins on Mars, they remain hidden beneath layers of dust, sand, and skepticism. The planet has endured billions of years of erosion, impact, and silence. Whatever may have stood there, if anything ever did, would be worn to the bone, erased until only faint outlines linger. Yet even the faintest outline can stir a story. Satellite imagery has given us countless such moments, a ridge that resembles a wall, a plateau whose edges form a perfect triangle, shadows that from one angle look uncannily like steps. Each time, higher resolution images reveal geology at work, wind-sculpted mesas, fractured rock, or volcanic remnants, and yet, each time the myth revives. The face on Mars, once debunked, still circulates as a reminder that our minds hunger for patterns. The so-called pyramids of Sidonia still inspire books, documentaries, late-night conversations. The ruins hypothesis is not science in the strictest sense, but it is not entirely fantasy either. It is a framework for asking questions at the edge of evidence. What if life did take root here, not just microbes, but something capable of shaping its environment? What if, for a brief span, Mars was not only alive, but alive with intelligence? And what if 3I Atlas, drifting silently now past its orbit, is connected to that story in ways we cannot yet see? Perhaps the comet is only coincidence, a frozen relic of another system. But to the mythic voice, coincidence is a kind of choreography. The third interstellar visitor, appearing in our skies at a moment when we are watching Mars more intently than ever, brushes against the orbit of a world whose mysteries refuse to fade. If Atlas were a vessel, if its fragments were probes, if its shimmering coma were more than ice, then Mars would be the place for secrets to awaken. Even if all we have are rocks and shadows, the power of the ruins hypothesis lies in the questions it invites. It forces us to see Mars not only as geology, but as possibility. It reminds us that civilizations rise and fall, and that silence does not always mean absence. It leaves open a door, one that Atlas, by its very presence, seems to pause before as it passes. And so, Section 6 closes not with certainty, but with wonder. Mars turns, its deserts glowing faintly red beneath the thin air. 3I Atlas drifts past, halo shimmering with the chemistry of another star. Between them, we imagine ruins, whether real or only dreamed, standing quietly, as though waiting to be remembered. Could it be that what we dismiss as stone and shadow are, in truth, the faintest echoes of builders long gone? And if so, does 3I Atlas come not as a stranger, but as something returning home? There is a difference between passing by and arriving. Passing is aimless, incidental, a comet streaking across the sky, a traveller wandering through a town not its own. Arrival, on the other hand, implies purpose. It suggests destination, a meeting arranged in advance, a script written long before the curtain rises. The rendezvous theory begins here, with the idea that 3I Atlas is not simply drifting but meeting Mars, specifically. Not because gravity pulls it, but because something, whether ancient, coincidence, or deliberate design, has drawn its path across this moment in time. Astronomers see only the math, a hyperbolic arc, inbound velocity outgassing light curves. Their models whisper of randomness shaped by physics. Yet the human mind is not satisfied with randomness. When lines intersect, we look for meaning. When patterns emerge, we ask if they are accidents or choreography. And so the thought blooms. What if this is not an accidental crossing, but a rendezvous planned across ages? To entertain such a thought is to step into myth, but myth has always been part of astronomy. The constellations are myths written in starlight. Even the names of planets carry old gods within them. Mars is the god of war, red with blood and dust. Atlas, the name bestowed on this comet, is the titan who bore the heavens on his shoulders. Already, a story seems to write itself. The god of war and the titan of the sky meeting in silence above our heads. But let us set myth aside and think in terms of possibility. If 3I Atlas were more than ice, if it were, as some dreamers suggest, a probe, a vessel, or a seed ship, then Mars would make sense as a destination. It is the closest planet to Earth with the potential for habitability. It carries water in its past, perhaps even in its present, hidden below. It is a place where something might wait, buried or dormant. To approach Mars is to approach a kind of cosmic waypoint. The rendezvous theory does not insist that this is true. Instead, it lingers on the poetic question, what if? What if Atlas has passed this way before, in cycles too long for human history to measure? What if Mars is not only a planet, but a meeting ground, a place where wanderers from other stars and relics of ancient oceans converge? Even if the answer is no, the framing is powerful. A comet becomes not just an object, but an actor with a role to play. Mars becomes not just a planet, but a stage where the script unfolds. We, the watchers on Earth, become the audience, leaning forward in the dark theatre of the sky. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the rendezvous exists not in the physics of Atlas, but in us, in the way we see its path, the way we fold coincidence into meaning. For even if it is only ice and dust, the comet has succeeded in meeting something, our imagination. As this section begins, let us hold the question gently. Is this merely a chance crossing, or is it the quiet arrival of a rendezvous written long before we knew to look? To imagine a rendezvous in space is to imagine patience beyond measure. On Earth, we arrange meetings across minutes, hours, perhaps years. But in the theatre of the cosmos, timing stretches into centuries, millennia, even eons. If 3i Atlas were ever meant to meet Mars, then the planning or the coincidence was written into the stars long before our species learned fire. Astronomers sometimes speak of windows of opportunity. A spacecraft launch must happen at just the right moment, when Earth and its target are aligned. Miss the window, and you wait years, even decades, for the chance to try again. Imagine then what it means for an interstellar comet to skim past Mars at the exact moment we on Earth are watching more intently than ever. The probability is staggering, and yet, here it is. In the rendezvous theory, this timing is no accident, it is choreography. The comet, having wandered light years, arrives now, when human eyes are awake and Mars is crowded with orbiters and rovers. If its passage were a message, the stage could not be better set. What kind of message, though, could be written in ice? Some dreamers suggest that 3i Atlas might carry the raw ingredients of life, a frozen library of carbon compounds. To brush near Mars could be to deliver or to retrieve. Others suggest that the comet itself might be a vessel, designed to survive eons, its fragments activating only when conditions align. In this telling, Mars is not random, but chosen, a rendezvous point waiting quietly across time. Skeptics, of course, push back. Gravity alone explains the approach. The comet's trajectory was bent by Jupiter, nudged by Saturn, and the math leaves no room for intent. But the human mind resists such neat closure. When improbability stacks too high, it feels like design, even when numbers argue otherwise. The dice of the cosmos may roll endlessly, but sometimes their throws look like stories. And what a story this would be! A traveller from another star meeting a world whose history is already riddled with mystery. Oceans long gone, ruins imagined in stone, methane that flickers in and out of detection. A planet watched by robots, dreamed of by poets. For Atlas to pass here, now, feels like a script written not in equations but in echoes. Perhaps the rendezvous theory is less about the comet itself and more about us. It speaks to the way we long for connection, for order and randomness, for a universe that does not merely happen but responds. In that longing, the rendezvous becomes real not in the physics of Atlas, but in the imagination of those who watch it. And so, as Mars waits and 3i Atlas drifts closer, we ask the question not as scientists, but as dreamers. Is this a chance alignment, or is it, in some quiet way, a meeting arranged across the abyss of time? The idea of a rendezvous carries with it a sense of intimacy. Two travellers, their paths drawn together across vast distances, pause for a moment of recognition before parting again. Whether those travellers are ships in a harbour, birds in migration, or comets and planets in the silence of space, The feeling is the same. This meeting matters. 3i, Atlas and Mars are, on the surface, indifferent. One is a fragment of ice and dust from another star. The other is a planet scarred by time, its oceans long gone, its air thin and frail. They do not know each other. They do not greet. And yet, to us, watching from Earth, their near alignment feels like something more. It feels like a story unfolding. What if Mars is not simply a bystander? What if its ancient landscapes hold memories of past encounters, traces of other visitors, frozen in stone, waiting for us to uncover? What if 3i Atlas is not the first to wander here, but one in a line of messengers, each brushing past the red planet like chapters in a book we have only just begun to read? The rendezvous theory does not require proof. Its power lies in suggestion. It invites us to see coincidence as choreography, silence as signal, passing as arrival. It reminds us that even in a universe ruled by gravity and chance, there is room for wonder, for the thought that we are witnessing not randomness, but resonance. As earthbound observers, we are the third presence in this meeting. Mars waits, 3i Atlas drifts, and we, perched on our blue world, watch the two draw near. In that triangle of attention, imagination becomes the bridge. Whether the comet is only ice or something more, whether Mars holds ruins or only rocks, the meaning of the rendezvous is shaped by us. And perhaps that is enough. For even if 3i Atlas is gone tomorrow, flung back into the dark, the questions it stirred will linger. Why Mars? Why now? Why at all? The answers may be unknowable, but the act of asking connects us to the planet, to the comet, and to each other. So the rendezvous theory closes not with certainty, but with a whisper. Is this a fleeting passage, or a meeting arranged across time and distance, a rendezvous written in the quiet language of the cosmos? There is a fine line between anomaly and artifact. An anomaly is a quirk of nature, a puzzle waiting for explanation. An artifact, by contrast, suggests intention, something made, something designed. Most scientists prefer the safer word. Yet when it comes to 3i Atlas, drifting with its strange green glow and carbon-rich coma, the whispers inevitably lean toward the latter. This is not without precedent. In 2017, when Oumuamua slipped silently past Earth, its peculiar acceleration sparked debates that still linger. Was it simply a shard of rock, thin as a blade, pushed by sunlight, or was it something crafted a solar sail, perhaps, abandoned or launched long ago? Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb famously suggested the second, and while many disagreed, the thought could not be erased. The universe had opened a door, however small, to the possibility of technology adrift among the stars. Now, with 3i Atlas, the door opens again. Its behavior is less dramatic than Oumuamua's, yet its chemistry and faint flashes invite questions. Too much carbon dioxide, too little water, a halo that seems to shift in ways not entirely predicted. Are these signs of exotic ice, or of something stranger, a system we do not yet recognize, machinery cloaked in dust? To even ask this is to wander into speculation, and speculation is often discouraged. But whispers are persistent. They gather in the gaps left by official reports, in the quiet where data pauses. Amateur astronomers speak of fragments peeling away, not like debris but like pods released in sequence. Online discussions compare the green coma to the exhaust of some unseen process. Theories, fanciful or not, sprout like wildflowers in the absence of certainty. Mars's presence in this story magnifies the whispers. If 3i Atlas brushed only Earth's orbit, we might think little beyond chance. But to pass so near a planet already wrapped in rumours of canals, ruins and hidden life that coincidence feels amplified, it invites speculation that the comet is not only a wanderer, but a messenger. And Mars, long cast as the backdrop of alien myth, becomes the obvious stage for its appearance. Is it possible that what we are seeing is technology? That the green shimmer is not chemistry but signal, not emission but communication? The rational voice hesitates, noting that nature itself often imitates design, yet the poetic voice leans forward, whispering, "But what if? For if it were true, if 3i Atlas carried more than ice, then its passage by Mars could be more than a coincidence. It could be a rendezvous, a return, or even a reawakening, a vessel from elsewhere meeting a world where something waits still, hidden beneath dust and stone. We may never know, but the questions linger, insistent and quiet, like a pulse beneath the night sky. The whispers of alien technology often begin at the edges of data, a curve that doesn't quite match predictions, a brightness that lingers longer than models suggest, a silence from official channels where updates should be plentiful. None of these, on their own, prove anything, but together they form an atmosphere, an impression that something lies just beyond explanation. With 3i Atlas, that atmosphere is thick. Its carbon dioxide coma is far richer than any comet we know from our solar system. Scientists explain this as evidence of a colder birthplace, a star system where ice is formed differently, yet the speculation creeps in. What if the chemistry is not natural, but engineered? What if the gases are not byproducts, but exhaust? Then there are the fragments. Ordinary comets shed debris chaotically, in bursts and sprays, but some reports describe Atlas's shedding as ordered, as though pieces detached in rhythm. Could this be mere illusion, our pattern-seeking minds imposing sequence where none exists? Almost certainly. And yet, if fragments were being deployed, the image would not be of a comet breaking down, but of a machine awakening. Mars, once again, deepens the intrigue. Imagine, for a moment, that Atlas was indeed a probe sent adrift across interstellar space, designed to endure eons. Where would it seek a waypoint? A world with water, past or present. A world whose thin veil of atmosphere still holds whispers of methane. A world where ruins real or imagined dot the surface. In other words, Mars. And so the theory unfolds, fragile but intoxicating. Perhaps Atlas is more than ice. Perhaps it carries memory, machinery, or even a message. Its approach to Mars would then be deliberate, a return to a place where something waits. What that something might be is left to imagination, a signal buried in the soil, a relay from long ago, or even relics of a civilization that vanished before Earth learned to write. To be clear, the scientific consensus rejects such ideas. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and evidence is thin. But whispers do not need consensus. They thrive in the gaps, in the quiet spaces where imagination fills what data does not. The more Mars resists giving us answers, the more the whispers grow. And in those whispers the question sharpens. Could we be witnessing alien technology in action, hidden in plain sight, cloaked as a comet drifting past Mars? For most astronomers, 3i Atlas will remain what it appears to be. A comet. Ice, dust, carbon dioxide, sunlight, gravity. No more, no less. And yet, for those listening in the quiet, the whispers tell a different tale. They do not claim certainty. They do not demand proof. They simply ask us to look again, to wonder whether what we call natural might sometimes be more. Consider the possibility of longevity. If an advanced civilization wished to send a probe across the stars, it would need to endure millions, even billions of years. What better disguise than a comet, a body of ice and rock indistinguishable from countless others, drifting unnoticed until the right alignment occurs. A vessel cloaked as nature itself, carrying within it secrets no eye could detect. Now imagine that vessel approaching Mars. Not Earth, too turbulent, too bright, too noisy, but Mars, quiet and red, patient in its turning. A planet with history, with scars of water, with rumours of ruins. If a message were waiting there, 3i Atlas might not be a wanderer at all, but a key. Its fragments could be triggers, its coma a veil. To us, coincidence. To another intelligence, perhaps a long-awaited rendezvous. Of course, this is speculation piled upon speculation. The skeptic's voice reminds us that comets shed fragments naturally, that unusual chemistry is not impossible, that silence from observatories is often bureaucracy, not conspiracy. And yet, in the theatre of imagination, these explanations do not erase the story, they only sharpen its contrast. Science explains, myth persists, and between them the whispers echo louder. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not Atlas itself, but our reaction to it. How quickly we leap from anomaly to artifact, how eagerly we trace patterns into purpose, how ready we are to hear technology in the hiss of sublimating ice. These impulses say as much about us as they do about the comet. They reveal a species restless for company, straining to catch a signal in the static of the stars. And so, 3i Atlas passes, its halo glowing faintly green, its fragments trailing in silence. Whether natural or not, it has already succeeded in awakening questions we cannot ignore. For if even one comet could be a vessel, one fragment a probe, then the universe itself becomes less empty, more alive, more haunted by possibility. The section closes not with answers, but with the whisper that lingers in the spaces between thought and dream. If this is technology, hidden within the guise of a comet, then what awaits us on Mars when the two meet at last? The night sky often feels like a mirror. We look upward and see not only stars but reflections of ourselves, our questions, our fears, our hopes. In the faint glow of 3i Atlas, this mirror grows even more ambiguous. Are we seeing a comet, simple and natural, or are we seeing something shaped by imagination, layered with myths too old to discard? Astronomers, careful and precise, remind us of the facts. The orbit is hyperbolic. The coma is rich in carbon dioxide. The halo glows green because sunlight tears molecules apart, leaving fragments that fluoresce. The faint flashes could be jets of gas erupting from beneath the surface. The fragments could be ordinary debris. To them, Atlas is only a comet, remarkable in its origin but ordinary in its physics. Yet when the facts are laid out, the questions remain. Why so much carbon dioxide? Why such a luminous halo? Why silence where updates should flow? Science explains, but explanation does not always satisfy. For every answer, another question steps forward, like a shadow lengthening at dusk. The tension lies in the gap between observation and interpretation. Observation gives us light curves, spectra, images faint with static. Interpretation gives us meaning, sometimes careful, sometimes reckless. To see a fragment drift from Atlas is observation. To imagine it as a probe is interpretation. Both happen in the same moment, one feeding the other. Mars's presence complicates this further. If Atlas had passed near Neptune or Uranus, we might shrug at coincidence. But Mars carries centuries of suspicion. Its valleys and mesas already wear the weight of imagined civilizations. Its thin air already smells of methane, faint and puzzling. When a comet from another star brushes close, our interpretations flare like sparks. We cannot resist linking the two mysteries, even if no link exists. What then? Are we really seeing? Are we witnessing ice sublimating in sunlight, or are we projecting patterns into the void? Are we detecting fragments of alien design, or simply the restless echoes of our own yearning? Perhaps both at once. Perhaps every comet is natural, but every comet is also a story, shaped not only by physics but by the eyes that watch it. 3i Atlas, in this sense, is both comet and canvas. It carries its ices from another star, but it also carries our questions, painted across its tail like constellations drawn by dreamers. The comet is real. The mystery is real. The line between them is where wonder lives. And so the question rises gently, like a whisper in the quiet. What are we truly seeing when we look at 3i Atlas, an interstellar rock of ice, or a reflection of our own imagination? To watch 3i Atlas is to walk a narrow bridge between certainty and wonder. On one side lies the steady hand of science, reminding us that comets behave according to physics, not intention. On the other lies imagination, whispering that perhaps the cosmos is more alive, more deliberate than we allow ourselves to admit. Every observation seems to sway us between these two sides, back and forth like footsteps over a gulf. Consider the brightness. Instruments record how Atlas flares and fades, its glow fluctuating as the sun's warmth stirs hidden ices. That is the scientific account. Yet to the eye inclined to story, these pulses resemble a heartbeat, steady, rhythmic, alive. One observer calls it sublimation, another wonders aloud if it is signal. Both describe the same data. The difference lies not in the sky, but in the lens of interpretation. Or take the fragments. A telescope captures faint streaks peeling away. The scientist calls them debris, the natural shedding of a comet under stress. The dreamer sees pods, released one by one, as though the comet were unfolding a hidden purpose. Again, the same event. Again, two stories woven from the same thread. And Mars, always Mars, adds its weight to the scales. A world that has never stopped tempting us with almosts. Almost oceans, almost life, almost ruins. When Atlas brushes its orbit, those almosts gather like clouds. If the comet had wandered near a world with less myth, perhaps we would accept randomness more easily. But Mars has never been neutral. It magnifies mystery the way a lens magnifies light. So, what are we really seeing? Perhaps only nature, complex yet indifferent, a shard of another star system, shedding gas and dust as it drifts by. Perhaps, though, we are also seeing ourselves, our hunger for meaning, our impatience with silence, our yearning for company in the dark. In this way, Three-Eye Atlas becomes both subject and mirror. It reveals as much about humanity as it does about the cosmos. And maybe that is the deeper truth, that the comet does not need to be alien technology, or messenger, or probe. Its mere presence, fleeting and strange, is enough to awaken questions we have carried for centuries. What is out there? Are we alone? Will we ever meet another intelligence among the stars? The light of Three-Eye Atlas glimmers faintly, a smear across telescopes, a whisper on spectrographs. We chart it carefully, but we also dream around it endlessly, and perhaps both are necessary. Without science, we drift into fantasy. Without wonder, we lose the reason to look up at all. Thus the question repeats itself like a refrain, soft but insistent. Are we seeing a comet as it truly is, or are we seeing what we need it to be? Perhaps the most humbling truth about astronomy is how much depends on perspective. The same light can yield different stories, depending on the eyes that interpret it. For some, Three-Eye Atlas is nothing more than ice and dust, a traveller obeying only the cold hand of physics. For others, it is a riddle, a visitor that defies neat categories and hints at something more. Both views may be incomplete, both may also be true, in their own way. On Earth, we are never passive observers. Our minds are restless, weaving patterns into noise, seeing faces in mesas, cities in dunes, intentions in comets. This is not a flaw but a reflection of our nature. We are a storytelling species, and the cosmos is the canvas on which we paint our questions. In that sense, what we see is never only the object, it is also the story we drape across it. Three-Eye Atlas embodies this dual vision. Its spectrum tells us of carbon dioxide and faint traces of water. Its orbit tells us it comes from beyond the Sunday. Those are facts. But the glow of green, the silence of missing updates, the fragments drifting away, those become something else in our imagination. They become whispers of alien technology, echoes of ruins, rendezvous at Mars. Are we wrong to think this way? Not entirely. For history shows that speculation often precedes discovery. Pulsars were once called little green men. Quasars were dismissed as anomalies before they reshaped cosmology. Even Galileo's moons of Jupiter were doubted, until time proved them real. To speculate is not to know. but it is to keep the door open. At the same time, imagination can mislead. Canals on Mars dissolved into tricks of light. The face on Mars melted back into stone. What we thought we saw was not what was there. Yet even those mistakes propelled us forward, compelling us to look closer, to send orbiters and rovers, to deepen our search. In that sense, illusions had value. They pushed us to seek truth, even through error. And so, when we ask what we are really seeing in 3i Atlas, the answer may be layered. We are seeing a comet, yes, but we are also seeing ourselves. Our longing, our doubts, our habit of turning silence into signal. The comet is both alien and familiar, both ice and metaphor. It does not need to be a vessel to carry meaning, it already carries it, because we place it there. As Mars turns nearby, and Atlas continues on its hyperbolic course, the mystery deepens not because of what the comet is, but because of what it represents. It is a reminder that observation and imagination are not enemies but partners. One grounds us, the other lifts us. One tells us what is, the other asks what might be. So we end this section with the question lingering, half scientific, half poetic. Are we really seeing 3i Atlas? Or are we seeing the reflection of our own need for mystery projected into the night? Every story about Mars is, in the end, also a story about Earth. When we imagine rivers flowing on the red planet, we are really picturing our own rivers, their currents transposed onto alien soil. When we wonder if life once stirred in Martian seas, we are asking whether our existence is unique or part of a larger pattern. Mars becomes not just a planet, but a mirror. 3i Atlas sharpens this reflection. Its icy body comes from elsewhere, a shard of a star system not our own. To see it drift near Mars is to feel two questions intertwine. What did Mars once hold, and what might Atlas still carry? One looks backward into history, the other outward into possibility. Together, they form a triangle of curiosity, Mars, Earth, and the interstellar traveller binding them in a quiet geometry. On Earth, Mars has long been the twin we never had. Close enough to visit, similar enough to tempt us, different enough to remind us of fragility. Its deserts echo our own, its polar ice mirrors our caps, its thin air warns us of how easily a world can lose its breath. To study Mars is to study a version of ourselves, stripped of oceans, stripped of forests, left with silence. It shows us not only what another planet can become, but what Earth could lose. Atlas, by contrast, offers a different kind of reflection. It comes not as a sibling, but as a stranger, a messenger from beyond. Its chemistry is not a cautionary tale, but a riddle, a fragment of a narrative written in another star's nursery. Together, Mars and Atlas create a story larger than either alone. One world reminding us of what we might lose, one visitor reminding us of how vast the universe really is. And there we stand, on Earth, the third participant in this quiet triangle. We watch with telescopes, speculate in whispers, dream in the spaces between data points. What we see in Mars and Atlas says as much about us as about them. Mars reflects our anxiety about survival. Atlas reflects our longing for connection. Both remind us that our own story is fragile, suspended between past and future, between certainty and wonder. It is tempting, then, to ask, is this alignment random, or is it invitation? If Mars shows us what can be lost, and Atlas shows us what waits beyond, then perhaps together they are asking us to look more closely at ourselves, at the thinness of our atmosphere, the vulnerability of our oceans, the fragility of life. For in watching Mars, and in watching Atlas, we are also watching Earth, and perhaps that is the most important truth of all. Mars has always been a lesson in contrasts. From a distance it resembles Earth more than any other planet in the solar system. Polar caps gleam white against rusty deserts. Valleys twist like scars left by rivers. Mountains tower higher than Everest. Canyons plunge deeper than the Grand Canyon. It looks, at first glance, like a cousin, a familiar face glimpsed in the crowd of planets. Yet approach closer, and the differences sharpen. The rivers are dry, the valleys silent, the air too thin to breathe. Temperatures swing violently between day and night, warmth stolen quickly into the void. Mars looks like Earth's reflection in a cracked mirror, recognizable, yet broken. And in that brokenness we glimpse our own vulnerability. This is why scientists speak of Mars as a cautionary tale. It may once have had oceans as wide as Earth's Atlantic, an atmosphere thick enough to cradle clouds and rain. But over time, it lost what made it habitable. Its magnetic field collapsed, leaving it exposed to solar winds. Its sky thinned, its seas boiled away, its rivers froze. Today, only memory remains. Minerals etched with water's touch, deltas fossilized in stone, ice buried beneath dust. For Earth, this story is unsettling. Mars shows how fragile habitability is. Planets do not hold their blessings forever. Change can strip them bare. And if Mars could lose oceans and skies, what prevents Earth from following? We comfort ourselves with our magnetic shield, our thriving biosphere, our abundance. Yet Mars stands nearby as a reminder that security is never absolute. Into this reflection enters 3i Atlas. Unlike Mars, it does not warn of loss. Instead, it hints at abundance beyond. Its ices are preserved, its chemistry alien, its journey impossibly long. Where Mars teaches fragility, Atlas teaches vastness. Together, they offer a dialogue, one saying, "Be careful what you might lose," the other saying, "Remember how much more there is to be found." And there we are, caught between them. Earth is neither as barren as Mars nor as mysterious as Atlas. It is a middle ground, a place where oceans still move, where forests still breathe, where skies still cradle storms. To see Mars stripped and Atlas distant is to appreciate, perhaps more deeply, the balance we live within each day. It raises a quiet but urgent question. Are we tending our world wisely? Mars is a lesson in what can slip away. Atlas is a reminder of how rare and precious life may be. Between them, Earth is the fragile miracle, the one place we know where consciousness blooms. And so, when we look at Mars and Atlas, we are not just studying astronomy, we are studying ourselves. To place Mars, Earth and 3i Atlas within the same frame of thought is to realize that astronomy is never just about what lies out there. It is also about the way those distant lights and shadows bend back toward us, shaping the way we understand ourselves. When you trace the arc of this interstellar wanderer near the path of Mars, while standing here on Earth, you are not just charting orbits, you are overhearing a conversation between worlds. Mars speaks first, though not in words. Its voice is the silence of ancient rivers that once flowed and are now dry. Its tone is the emptiness of basins that once held seas but now hold only dust. Look at the planet closely, and you feel its history like a faded photograph, familiar outlines, but with all the colour drained away. It is not just another planet. It is a lesson carved in stone, a reminder that habitability is not permanent, that worlds can forget their oceans, that memory can outlast abundance. Then comes the voice of 3i Atlas, softer, harder to place. It does not warn of endings, it hints at beginnings. It drifts in from a place we cannot name, carrying the chemistry of another star's nursery, a faint green glow that feels almost like breath. Its fragments trail behind it like breadcrumbs across the void. Atlas does not tell us what can be lost. It reminds us how much remains unknown, how vast the stage is, how many beginnings the universe might still hold. And then, in this dialogue, there is Earth. Earth does not whisper from a distance, we live within its voice. It is the sound of oceans striking shorelines, of storms moving across forests, of rivers cutting their way toward the sea. Unlike Mars, our water has not yet vanished. Unlike Atlas, our origins are not a riddle. But when we set Mars and Atlas beside Earth, our own world becomes sharper, more luminous, more fragile in contrast. Mars shows us how easily oceans can disappear. Atlas shows us how rare they might be beyond. And Earth sits between them, holding its breath, a fragile oasis suspended in a delicate balance. Astronomy, in this way, is not only the study of distant worlds, it is the study of mirrors. Mars is a mirror of endings, showing us what our own planet might one day resemble if we are careless or unlucky. Atlas is a mirror of beginnings, reminding us that the universe is old, strange, and full of stories not yet told. And Earth is the mirror of the present tense, a fleeting moment where oceans, forests, and skies align to create something both temporary and miraculous. The thought is humbling. To gaze at Mars is to confront mortality on a planetary scale. To gaze at Atlas is to confront possibility on a cosmic one. And to gaze at Earth, in the light of both, is to realize that we stand at the intersection of impermanence and wonder. We are the only ones we know who can look outward, compare, reflect. That act alone is fragile, fleeting, precious. And so, perhaps, the greatest gift of this alignment is not proof of ruins on Mars or secrets within Atlas. It is perspective. To be reminded that planets can lose what sustains them. To be reminded that interstellar travelers carry stories we cannot yet read. And to be reminded that our own world, alive and vibrant, must not be taken for granted. Mars tells us what can be lost. Atlas tells us what is still out there. And Earth, our harbour, tells us what must be cherished. Three voices, woven together across silence, forming a kind of lullaby for the cosmos. So, as we close this section, picture yourself standing under the night sky. Mars is glowing faintly red in the east, Atlas a barely perceptible smear of light, Earth firm beneath your feet. Three worlds in quiet conversation, three lessons entwined, and in their company we hear not answers but the gentlest of reminders, that to look outward is also to look inward, that to dream of other worlds is also to care for our own, and that what we see out there will always return, softly, as questions about who we are here. Sometimes the most haunting thing in astronomy is not what we see, but what we don't. A flash across a telescope can be explained, a spectrum can be debated, even a fragment can be tracked and catalogued. But silence resists explanation. It stretches, it lingers, it presses against the mind until questions bloom in the quiet. With Three-Eye Atlas, silence has become almost a character of its own. In the early weeks after discovery, updates trickled in measurements of brightness, cautious notes on its odd chemistry, a handful of spectra. Then the flow slowed. Reports grew sparse, generic, as though the comet had slipped behind a curtain. Hubble's eye dimmed, Webb's data faltered, and amateur astronomers filled the void with whispers. The official reason is always the same: priorities, calibration, and limited resources. Telescopes cannot watch one comet forever, but for those who wait, silence feels like something more. It feels like withholding, it feels like a secret suspended just out of reach, and in that space between what we know and what we wonder, speculation multiplies. It is not the first time silence has stirred unease. When Oumuamua vanished into the dark, data ran out long before questions did. When methane on Mars flickered in and out of detection, announcements lagged behind observations. Each pause, each gap, became fertile ground for theories. Silence does not erase curiosity, it feeds it. Perhaps that is why the absence of answers feels louder than noise. If Atlas is only a comet, why not flood us with images? If nothing unusual is happening, why the careful wording, the long pauses between updates? Of course, the rational voice explains. Astronomy is slow, data is precious, analysis takes time. But the imaginative voice presses harder. Or is there something they're not ready to say? And here lies the paradox. Silence is not neutral. It can be both innocent and suggestive, both empty and overflowing. To one ear it means nothing, to another it means everything. Does it hide truth, shielding us from something too strange to reveal? Or does it protect us, sparing us from conclusions we are not yet ready to face? Three-Eye Atlas drifts on, indifferent to these interpretations. Its coma glows faintly, its fragments trail behind, its orbit carries it ever onward. The silence is not in the comet. The silence is in us, in the distance between data and desire, between questions asked and answers withheld. And so, this section opens with the simplest of paradoxes. In the silence of space, are we hearing nothing at all, or are we hearing too much? If you have ever stood outside at night, away from the hum of cities, you know that silence is not truly empty. It is alive with suggestion. The rustle of wind in the trees, the faint hum of insects, the shifting of your own breath, all become louder, more present, because of what is missing. Silence magnifies what little sound remains. In the same way, the silence surrounding Three-Eye Atlas magnifies every scrap of rumor, every delay in communication, every half-formed thought. Consider the telescopes. They are not silent machines. They gather torrents of information, streams of photons falling onto detectors. But when those streams are slowed, filtered, delayed before they reach the public, silence blooms in the gap. A few weeks without an image feels like a few centuries in the impatient world of digital time. And so, the question grows: why does the flow falter when curiosity is greatest? For scientists, the answer is mundane. Data must be cleaned, cross-checked, reviewed. To release too soon is to risk error. But imagination thrives not on caution, but on hunger. When words like anomalous, unexpected, or peculiar slip into reports, then vanish without follow-up, we cannot help but suspect something has been tucked away. The silence does not calm us. It provokes us. Even Mars itself seems to join this hush. Orbiters circle, rovers crawl, but official releases seldom dwell on the comet hanging faintly above. If a rover's camera caught Atlas streaking in the Martian sky, would we know immediately? Or would the image sit in a database, buried among thousands of frames of rocks and dust, waiting for someone years later to stumble upon it? Silence has a way of disguising itself as delay. The human response to such quiet is always the same. We begin to fill it. Some imagine fragments of Atlas as probes, others picture messages encoded in its green glow. Forums and podcasts speculate about cover-ups, about agencies choosing to keep conclusions hidden. The less we are told, the more our minds invent. In this way, silence becomes a collaborator, shaping the narrative as much as data itself. But silence also carries another possibility, one more tender, more unsettling. Perhaps there is no cover-up. Perhaps there is nothing extraordinary to reveal. Perhaps the silence is exactly what it seems: emptiness, absence, the vast indifference of space. And perhaps what frightens us most is not the idea that truth is hidden, but the idea that there is no truth to find, that Three-Eye Atlas is simply what it is, and we are the ones layering mystery upon it. The question then becomes heavier. Does silence hide truth, or protect us from realizing there is none? Either way, it lingers. We lean closer to the quiet, straining for meaning in the hush. The silence does not answer, it only deepens. There is a kind of silence that feels empty, and there is a kind of silence that feels full. The silence of space belongs to the second kind. It is not absence but presence, a vast invisible weight pressing down from every direction. When we listen to Three-Eye Atlas and hear no signal, no pattern, no disclosure beyond the ordinary, the silence feels full of possibilities. What if the comet is entirely natural, and we are the ones making it strange? Then the silence is a mirror, reflecting only our longing for company in the stars. What if, instead, the comet is unusual, carrying chemistry or patterns we do not yet understand, and the quiet from observatories masks confusion or caution? Then the silence is a curtain, hiding truths not yet ready for daylight. Or, most unsettling of all, What if the comet is more than natural, an artifact, a vessel, and silence is deliberate, a choice meant to protect us, or perhaps to protect itself? Each of these interpretations grows stronger precisely because no single answer comes. Silence holds the stage open for imagination, and in that openness, myths bloom. The pause becomes a heartbeat. The absence becomes a message. The delay becomes a signal in itself. And perhaps that is the real lesson. Silence is not the enemy of discovery. It is the soil in which curiosity grows. Had the sky been endlessly noisy data streaming without interruption, we might have overlooked the wonder. Instead, the gaps made us listen harder, dream more vividly, reach further. In its own way, silence is a teacher, reminding us that the universe does not always rush to reveal itself. As Mars turns in its orbit and Three-Eye Atlas continues along its path, the silence between them deepens, stretching like a pause in a story not yet finished. Earth listens from afar, uncertain whether to hear emptiness or intention, and we, caught in that listening, are reminded that not every question demands an immediate reply. So this section closes on a thought as soft as the night itself. In the silence of space, are we being denied the truth, or are we being gently spared from truths we are not yet ready to face? The night grows quieter now. Our journey has drifted from oceans long vanished on Mars to whispers of alien technology, to the silence that sometimes feels louder than words. And through it all, Three-Eye Atlas has glided steadily, like a lantern carried across a darkened sea. Mars lingers below, a red world turning slowly, its deserts still and cold. Once it may have worn blue seas and white clouds, but tonight it lies in shadow, patient as ever. Above it, the faint smear of Atlas continues on its way interstellar, unstoppable, destined never to return. Two wanderers, one a planet, one a comet, sharing a moment on the stage of the heavens before parting forever. There is something soothing in this thought. Not everything demands resolution. Some mysteries are best left half-lit, their edges blurred, their meanings unfinished. Mars will not tell us what it remembers. Atlas will not tell us where it has been. The silence between them is not failure, it is invitation. An opening for wonder, for imagination, for dreams. And dreams are where much of science begins. The dream of water on Mars gave rise to rovers. The dream of life elsewhere keeps telescopes searching. Even the dream of interstellar messengers, though fragile, pushes us to look harder, to listen longer, to ask better questions. In this way, dreams are not escapes but beginnings. So as you rest tonight, picture that slow tableau in the sky, Mars glowing faintly, Atlas drifting steadily away, Earth turning quietly beneath your feet. Three worlds, each carrying its own story, each reminding us that the cosmos is not empty but alive with mystery. Let them be your companions as you drift towards sleep. The day may have been noisy, full of tasks and voices and interruptions, but here, in the soft hush of night, you can let it all go. Let Mars hold your questions of loss. Let Atlas carry your questions of possibility. Let Earth cradle you in its oceans and forests and the steady breath of life. And if you do fall asleep before this story ends, that is perfectly fine. In fact, it is the most natural thing in the world. The cosmos will continue its quiet turning, Atlas will continue its flight, Mars will continue its waiting, and you will continue your dreaming. And perhaps, in dreams, the answers will already be waiting there, patient, gentle, shimmering like stars just beyond the edge of sight. So close your eyes now. Let the red planet fade into darkness. Let the interstellar wanderer drift farther and farther until it is no more than a memory. The night will hold them for you. The silence will keep their secrets safe, and the universe, vast and unhurried, will go on singing its cosmic lullaby.